Ready. We're not ready to stream yet.
Welcome to Shelly Life. We'll be right back with you. Did you start your watch party? Now's the time to do it.
I'm trying to. I don't see it. It didn't come up. Oh no.
You should be able to do it from your page or
Okay.
refresh it.
No, I'm sorry. I can't. Ah. Okay. Hold on 1 second. I'm on your site and I don't see your stream from your site.
That's okay. We're going to roll.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Welcome to Shelly Live. I'm Shelly Carter, owner practitioner of Alder Healing Center here in Lombard, Illinois. And as you can see, we have a new platform and a new way that we're streaming the program. So I really appreciate all of you who have been following me, and welcome to those of you who are new to the program. Our guest today is Torian Richardson. So Torian, welcome to our show.
Hey. Good evening, everyone.
I'm so glad you could be with us today.
Shelly, thank you for having me. It is a pleasure. It's an honor. And I can't believe we put this together. We've been talking about it for a while. So it's an honor to be able to actually do it.
I know, right? So many ins and outs and roads and places to actually get us to this place.
Yeah.
So the topic of conversation today is courageous vulnerability. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. So before we do that, for those of you who don't know Torian, he is an investor, a cultural scientist, a global executive coach. He draws from his vast experience to inspire the genius in others to live, and I so love this word, valiantly, so their potential grows to impact. And so, I was just thinking about, okay, potential grows to impact. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if we think about as human beings, we all have potential. We're actually all a genius at something, right? All of us have that ability. So it's taking that potential that we all harnessed in the specific thing or the variety of things that we're actually a genius at. How do we take that and make it into or turn it into a larger impact that not only affects us and those within our immediate sphere, but other people out into the world, out into the universe as well. So that impact could be broader or shorter for some as opposed to others, but it's really about taking that potential and making a larger impact. So if you just think about your favorite song or your favorite artist that really resonates with you, and when you listen to their music, it can actually take you to a different place.
Now, for me, that would be Luther Vandross.
Okay, Luther. Now, I would give a Luther imitation, but you might lose some viewers if they hear me sing. So I'm not going to do that to you.
What is that? No pain, no gain.
Yeah, it would be very painful too.
Oh dear.
Oh boy.
So, what else would you like us to know about you?
Boy. So one of the things that I enjoyed doing growing up, and I still enjoy to this day, is to actually ride a bike. I love being outside. I like to move around. And one of the reasons that my bicycle growing up was so important was because it gave me the opportunity to experience different parts of the neighborhoods that I lived in and see other people and see other cultures. So for those of you all who may not be familiar with me, I grew up in the Chicagoland area, originally on the south side of Chicago. I lived in Justice, and then I also grew up in the Aurora, Naperville area. Three very distinct, different types of neighborhoods. But what my bike gave me was the opportunity not only to explore them, but also to escape the situation that I had at home, because I grew up in a home that was abusive, lots of violence and drugs, physical abuse, and things of that nature. So that was my escape. That was my freedom. And so that bike or the feeling of being on that bike has stayed with me my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's opened up a lot of doors for me to be able to travel. I've had the opportunity to live and work on 4 different continents in the United States and Europe. I was in Africa for 2 years, and then I lived in China for 5 years. And that spirit of being free, that sovereignty of being on that bike is something that's been,
The adventurer.
yeah, I like the adventure. I
Yeah,
love the adventure. I
yeah,
love the adventure.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So, folks, it's like when we think of the word courageous and then we
Mm,
think of the word vulnerability. And, I've been pondering those two words since Tori and I have been talking about this program. And it's like, okay, it doesn't even make sense that the two of these words would even go together.
mhm.
And yet it's like, and so Torian, what would you say about that? Because like I'm gonna give you the floor at this moment and then I'll probably just jump right in.
Please, at any moment, and please, for sure.
And Nancy says hello. So she's waving.
Hey. So here's the thing with courageous vulnerability. When we think about being vulnerable, just as people, we think that part of it takes actual courage to be vulnerable. And the thing is that that's not necessarily true. And we extrapolate the two. If you think about being vulnerable, someone who chooses to stick their head in the sand if they have a really big problem, right? They're still vulnerable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're being courageous.
Mhm.
So when we put those two words together, it really becomes a short formula for success and really for us to create the conditions that people opt into, that people want to be around from a connection standpoint
Yeah.
and from a leadership standpoint.
And so how have you implemented that in your own life?
Well, it goes back to my story of the bike.
Okay.
The bike gave me a lot of freedom,
Yeah.
and that has kind of catapulted me to a lot of different opportunities in the world, professionally and personally. I've been blessed with the opportunity to travel to over 80 different countries and spend time there. And it takes a lot to put yourself in situations that you're not necessarily familiar with. A really good example for me would be living and working and actually earning a degree in mainland China.
Yeah.
Um, Not a lot of English spoken, especially outside of the larger cities of Beijing and Shanghai and larger cities of that nature. And I really had to challenge myself around how comfortable was I in actually being uncomfortable and intentionally putting myself in those uncomfortable situations.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, how uncomfortable was it? And what were some of the things that you did to help move yourself forward? So, you know what I'm saying? Yeah,
I
yeah.
do. I do. I mean, and I have a few stories around this, but I'll talk about living and working and studying in China because I mentioned that one already. For me, it was a sense of a learning mindset. So when I originally got there, yeah, and you notice everything is different, right? There's the signs are different. There's no English on anything. I mean, there truly is a gap between the different cultures. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to come in with the mindset of what I've already experienced isn't necessarily the only truth. It's
Mm.
just my truth based on my experience. So I wanted to be very wide open and have a lot of white noise, if you will, around just experiencing the culture, how people moved, what they bought, et cetera, et cetera.
So I'm going to stop you for a minute
Yeah.
because I'm just curious, for those who are listening, how many of you have a fixed way of thinking about something? So if you were taken out of your own environment, how would you operate? Or how, like even talking about this sometimes evokes certain emotions within people, right?
It does.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard, right? This is not easy. And honestly, the closer we come to that growth moment, to that new opportunity, or how I like to articulate it, to expanding the horizon of our experiences, the more uncomfortable it becomes. That's actually when we need to edge forward just that much more. And
mm,
so for me, yes, it was coming into China with that mindset, with that state of being. And there were a lot of things that were uncomfortable. The pace in which people move, the amount of people that were out on the street. I mean, if you
okay.
take
So let me ask you this: was the pace faster or was the pace slower?
it was faster because there were
Really?
more people. Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
wow.
In the large city, for sure. So if you're getting on the train during rush hour in Beijing, it's like you see in Japan, right? You're being kind of stuffed into the train. You have to get to them very quickly, and people are moving very. If you fall, you
You're in
may
trouble.
be stampeded in some of those subways. But it's simply because there are a lot of people, and that's a difference, right? So the speed is there. the
Mm.
language barrier. I mean, there really isn't a lot of context. I didn't even know how to say ni hao when I landed in Beijing.
And
So
what does that even mean?
it means hi, hi,
Oh. Okay.
hello, ni hao, ni
Yeah.
shinti hao ma. um,
For
but
those of you global listeners.
I'm sure some of my listeners will be laughing at my pronunciation right now. Um, but yeah, and so being in that environment, it's you literally have to take yourself back to being 3, 4 years old and trying to pick up the language because that's where you are from a linguistic standpoint. Um,
Mhm.
and that was very uncomfortable, especially when I was in China. I wasn't a spring chicken. That may be the best way to articulate it for your show. So it took a lot.
Yeah. So Phyllis says, "Hi, Phyllis. Thanks for joining us. Your truth is not the only truth. Powerful insight. Thank you." And then Nancy's asking, "What did you do there?" So I think Torian's coming into that in just a moment.
Yeah. So when I was there, I earned a degree in a master's degree actually in public policy and international economics. But then I also started a business that I have now called Guangxi Universal. So Guangxi actually stands for relationships, right? So the English translation would be universal relationships or universal connection in the name of the company. And we were working in education and we were doing some training and development. And then we had a chance to expand the company into helping students that actually wanted to study here in the United States. So it was a great experience personally and professionally. And it's something that I wouldn't change for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what has been your most recent place and space where you felt vulnerable?
Ooh, wow.
And it could be as soon as something that happened today,
Wow.
where it actually took you courage to pull yourself forward.
Okay, so we'll get off topic. We talked a little bit about this, but I'll go into so I'm the caregiver right now for my mother. And after 18, 20 years of travel and working and living and doing all these things around the world, what I realized was I had to come back home to heal.
Mm,
And candidly, that was the hardest thing that I had to do. That was about 2 years ago. I put a lot of things on hold, some things professionally, but it really was around the energy and the experience that I had growing up, seeing where my parents were, particularly my mother,
yeah,
and trying to hold some healing space so that as we are experiencing and really enjoying each other during arguably our last time together, that it's done in a positive way. So yeah. I didn't
yeah.
think we were gonna talk about that.
You never know what I pull out of my hat.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
No,
So, yeah, I know it's been a challenge and it does take courage and allowing yourself to be vulnerable even when you don't want to be.
well, it's hard because my internal story and my internal processing was around you've had these experiences, you've learned so much about culture and
Mhm.
neurodiversity and, all the terms that we use personally and professionally. However, I would have conversations specifically with my mother over the phone, and I would be triggered, and emotionally, I'd be right back to being 13, 14 years old.
Yeah,
And so it's like, you work in this space, you talk to people about optimization and how do you show up in an authentic way, but
yeah,
you have some things that you have to pull up yourself. So I knew that I had to face that, and it took a lot of courage for me to do that because you're dealing with that emotional armor that you put up.
yeah. So how's the armor going?
It's a few kinks in it, we
A few kinks or a few dents.
yeah, I guess some dents, a few axes have hit it a little bit, a few spears, but
Yeah,
um it's coming down, right? Because I'm learning how to take some of the principles that I work with clients with and organizations with, and actually apply that to my relationship with my family, specifically my mom.
yeah,
But it does take a lot because I'm learning acceptance, and I'm trying to learn acceptance around how they have chosen or she's chosen to make decisions and get to this point.
yeah,
And I can't necessarily come in with a strategic plan and an operational strategy And
It won't go so well.
no, 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 not at all. Not at
Yeah.
all. No, no.
I acknowledge you for like allowing her the space to have it her way, whatever that is, but that you show up in the space of love and generosity for her, which I think bridges, the being courageous and the vulnerability together. And I'm not sure, I'm probably going to mess your name up, but Co Simons, she says, awesome exclamation. That's hard yet so rewarding at the same time.
Mm,
So thank you. Yeah. So I think for me, it's interesting because we were both talking about our sharing different vulnerability places and spaces. Is my most recent one has been, oh my God. So my daughter is a veteran. My dad was a veteran. There's
mm,
lots of veterans in my family
mhm.
line. And she was in the Air Force, and she, of course, is out now. And so when she was in the Air Force, she was Special Forces. So not somebody you want to trifle with. So she then decides to become a personal trainer, and then she decides she's going to go into the cages and be, so we're not going to really get into that conversation. So the bottom line is you don't want to mess with her. So she moved to New Mexico a year ago, and she's been doing she works with veterans and helps veterans find homes and find jobs for goodwill.
Mhm.
And in the process of that, so she decided to take on 22 push-ups for 22 days because it averages about 22 veterans commit suicide every day.
Wow.
And down in the link, somewhere, I'll put the hotline for that for anybody who knows anybody who needs support. And so my daughter, being who she is, she's doing her push-ups, and I'm watching her over the past few weeks, and I'm like, yeah, no, I can never do that. That would not be me. And film it, right? So then I was watching a few days ago, and she's like, oh, and you can use a chair, and oh, you can use a wall. And I'm like, oh, I could use a wall. I could probably do that. Oh dear, do I want to? And I am very self-conscious with my body image and all of that. And that's something that I've been working on. And I'm like, oh dear God, if I do this live, then the whole world is out to see it, right? And I'm like, do I really? Okay, so here we are. I forget what day it was. It's probably Thursday. And I'm like, hey,
Mm.
I saw you the other day, and I'm thinking of maybe I might want to do this. And she got really excited. I got really scared. I'm sweating. My hands are sweaty. And then she's like, okay, well, let's start tomorrow morning. I'm like, oh no, you've got to be kidding me. So I'm like, so here we are. I think it was Saturday. I don't remember what morning it was. It was a morning, Saturday morning, I think it was. No,
Mhm.
it was Sunday morning. And so I wake up just in time, 15 minutes to brush my teeth, kind of comb through my hair,
Right.
no makeup, in whatever it was I was wearing. And so she decides, she's like, well, I'm going to let you go first and I'll coach you through it. And I'm like, oh, I am in trouble now. So, when you talk about, my heart was already pounding and I was already
Mhm.
sweating. And I'm like, okay, I can totally not do this and then just like not show up, or I can just take that deep breath and step into doing it anyway. And that's what I would say being courageous is doing it in the face of not wanting to do it.
Absolutely.
And so, and it wasn't bad enough that I'm showing up the way I'm showing up in my vulnerable state. And then she's like, okay, mom, tuck your pelvis in. She's like, I know you got the booty thing going on, but tuck that in and shoulders down. And so like, she's like, I'm like,
You didn't tell me about all this. You didn't tell me to watch that one.
I
Just for the
know.
record, you didn't tell me to tune into that.
Hey, it's recorded, so you
Okay. All
can
right.
see that.
I'm gonna search for it too.
But talk about like feeling raw and open,
Hmm.
exposed, vulnerable, and then you're having someone correcting you in the middle of all that other stuff that's going on inside your
Yeah.
head. So
Yeah.
that was my most recent. But when I was done, I just felt like at a whole nother level of being empowered and courageous, and to me, or for me, it was just another level of embracing who I am, and my body, and continuing loving myself at so many different levels. And so that actually, it was yesterday morning. I've
Mhm.
lost track of days. This morning was day number 2. So I did another live feed this morning. I actually did it here at the office.
Okay.
And I was like really proud of myself for just actually, it wasn't as hard as the first day, but it was much easier to set things up, and talked about a few things before I actually did the push-ups, the wall push-ups. I am so
Okay.
not ready for anything else.
It's still a push up. It's
Baby
okay.
steps, baby steps.
It's still a
But
push up.
I was like, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. So it was just a really great feeling, and I felt really great and had lots of energy throughout the day. And so yeah, so that was my most immediate vulnerable story.
Well, and here's the great thing about courageous vulnerability in that form.
Yeah.
Our children and our toddlers model it all the time. That's how we learn how to walk. That's
Mhm.
how we learn our language, right? We
Yeah.
start off and it's very awkward. It feels uncomfortable. And to look at the baby try to walk, it is uncomfortable, but it's cute because it's a small baby.
Yeah.
But think about the moments, and you're not even the being that's learning how to walk, how excited you become when the baby gets halfway across the room and then it goes all the way across the room, and then it can actually walk without, the baby can walk without
Well,
falling.
the mom or dad, they're cheering them on, and
Everybody's cheering them on, and it's like at some point as adults, for whatever reason in our life, we move away from that, we turn that off, and that is actually the living breathing model of what courageous vulnerability is.
yeah,
Children become more aware, they quickly learn, they push
yeah,
themselves, they take that fear, because fear is okay, and then they still move forward in spite of the fear, as opposed to staying still because of it. And that's the first part of the engine of being courageous. So
yeah.
it's a part of our nature. We just have to be aware of it and push it.
Well, and the surprising thing for
Mm.
me is not only how many people watched, but how many people were cheering me on, and how other people responded. I just did 20 just because you did, or I did 22 because you did 22. So I'm like, well, how cool was that?
Yeah.
It just like was,
But this goes back, what you just said goes back to my purpose statement, right? Which is taking potential and turning it into impact, because you just described how you being courageously vulnerable in public, or at least on that platform, inspired other people to actually take action. So it's actually bigger than it, you embolden them. You said, "Hey, I'm going to inspire you to actually do something different."
yeah,
And that's the gift of courageous vulnerability in which we can show up. So when we talk, is even personally or professionally, but in the professional world, when people start talking about transformative environments and diversity and inclusion and being more innovative or building environments of trust, all of these things are like subsets of a person or organization that is courageously vulnerable. So that's where you actually have to start. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been talking about it so much and trying to write about it at this moment.
yeah, that's awesome. And we're gonna actually, I'm gonna actually have you talk about that when we come back from our commercial break. So, folks, we'll be right back.
Yay!
So, our next guest, we're actually going to change the date for him because of his schedule. So, join us on Shelly Live. We're going to be next Wednesday, July 1st. A lot of times, you guys have questions and we don't always get to all of them. So, send me your questions in advance so we can make sure they get covered. And we are looking forward to good news January 21st and beyond. So, he's going to cover predictions, what's to come, good news for the future. So that's next Wednesday, July 1st from 1:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, Facebook Live, Alder Healing Center page. So be sure and like the page, and that way you'll be notified when we go live. And then you can also start a watch party. So those of you who are on now and would like to start a watch party, feel free to do that.
Yay!
And then there were a few other things I needed to work out with my course that's coming up, which is Basic Energy 101. So within the next few weeks, I'm so excited. We're going to be kicking that off. So there'll be
Nice.
more information coming on that soon. So stay tuned.
Nice.
So, Torian, what's going on in your world? You have a few things coming up.
Wow, yes. So, one of the things I wanted to share with your listeners is a podcast. Podcast is called Where's Your Heart? And this podcast is centered around vulnerability, but really, how do we champion one of the best and most influential powers that we have as human beings, which is our vulnerability. And we allow that space, we create that space actually for our guests to actually dig deep into their deepest emotions around what's happening right now or whatever is in their heart. So, Where's Your Heart? You can find our Facebook page. You can go to where'syourheart.com, find everything there. And we actually live stream on Facebook every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, and 3 p.m. Pacific. So tune in.
And generally, how long are your programs going to be, Corey?
1 hour. I have a co-host, a really good friend of mine, Royce. He's down in New Mexico,
Okay.
and we have a great dialogue and hold that space. But it'll be an hour. So we will have guests some weeks, not every week, but we will be topic focused. So you'll be able to see the topic and chime in just like you're doing here.
Yeah, awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. And so, just a couple other things I forgot to mention is Friday nights are meditation by design airs on Facebook Live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Oh my God, amazing, amazing, amazing. So you bring your journals, you bring one or two things you want to work on, and so I don't even know what else to say except just join us. And it's for a half an hour. So be there or be square.
Yeah.
So the question is,
What's up?
how do you acknowledge fear and push through?
How do you acknowledge fear and push through?
Mm.
I think the first thing is to be still. And when I say still, I don't mean physically still, but just to be internally feel still and be able to feel it. Um, Fear is an emotion, but it's actually an emotion that's justified by beliefs as well. So things that are attached to it that actually rationalize it. But
Mhm.
it actually is a real thing from a subconscious standpoint. So acknowledging it and being still in it, and then I like to practice breathing exercises. So box breathing is really important. Box breathing meaning just taking a 4 second inhalation from your nose, holding it for 4 seconds, right? Exhaling for 4 seconds through your nose, holding that, and then coming back to a 4 second inhalation. And so I do a lot of box breathing and actually trying to increase that number. But it helps me to bring my parasympathetic nervous system down. It
Yeah.
helps me to be a little bit more emotionally balanced and but still acknowledge that I am in a fearful state and I can feel the emotions from my fingertips down to my toes.
Here's the thing that I find about, I didn't know it had a name called box breathing. And so I learned something new today. But one of the things that I love about that type of breathing, like when you're in a tense situation or
Mm,
you're upset or you want to like, mm, that
mm,
type of upset, it really, the calming of the nervous system helps to also clear your head. So
yes.
you can actually begin to think before you respond. So if you're in a fight, a verbal fight or argument with somebody, and you're at that breaking point, and you're like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to start taking some breaths and calm myself down. And when you begin to do that, your head is actually clearer to
Mm,
be able to speak from the heart versus speaking out of anger or speaking out of, um, I'm going to say also vulnerability, because I think when people feel vulnerable, they want to put their guard up, and they're speaking from fear instead of from the place of peace and calm. What do you?
absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%. For me, the second thing I try to do is take myself into a calm, still, peaceful place. And so for me, I like to dive. So I'm a diver. So I can
You mean like
literally
as in scuba dive?
scuba dive. Sorry, yes, I should be more specific. So a scuba diver, PADI certified diver. So I like to travel. I had the pleasure of being able to dive the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador last year. Oh,
Mm.
oh,
Oh,
oh.
incredibly beautiful. Oh my gosh.
I mean, you just see things, colors that don't even exist. It is it's heavenly, and it's such an experience to where you're weightless. So that is where I take myself back to that specific
Mm,
moment over the past year. But other places that I've had the pleasure to dive, and that helps as well. It helps me to center on what's important in the situation, and then I ask myself, what do I fear here? And it's a constant question. What do I fear here?
oh, that's a great
What do I
question.
fear here? What do I fear here? And it makes me present,
Yeah.
and I say it enough to where I'm answering myself, and it's usually I'm calm enough, I'm asking myself that question enough. I don't feel that anxiety, and I can identify that it's not necessarily what the situation is. It's
Mhm.
just that I don't know what's on the other side of
Mm,
whatever I have to do, whether it's jumping out of an airplane or making the decision to move back to the Chicagoland area from New York City
mm,
to jump into some emotional healing with my family.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, those of you who are listening, when you get into that place of fear or you can't hear anything somebody's saying, what are the things that you do to actually work through that? Drop it in the chat. I'd like to hear from you guys.
Yeah, great.
So, and then
Hey, what's up?
so so I'm just thinking of, we're on the word vulnerable, right? And so you and I were engaging in the conversation of love yourself
Mm,
vulnerable,
mm,
and it's like, I think so many of us are looking out here for love to come our way, or looking for somebody else to give us the love to fill whatever that space or void is. But love yourself vulnerable, like for me, is loving you to you,
yes.
loving yourself to yourself. So what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the first stage for me. It was a heightened sense of self-awareness, of self-reflection,
Hmm.
and learning how to not only understand that state and where I was, but to love and accept where I was as well, and to really be able to look at yourself. I call it a trusted mirror, to have a trusted mirror, and this will be a part of the book as well. How do you have or create a trusted mirror so that you can learn how to love yourself where you are and how you are,
Mm,
and accept that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you on the court?
On the basketball court? I'm gonna say you do not want to see me play basketball, especially with these old knees that I have now. Mm-mm.
Sorry about that. I'm thinking of the court of life, like, we're
Oh, oh, okay. So
engaged in life and
I went to basketball court, but you see how perceptions, right? Everybody's perception is different. I just completely made something up right there. I'm like, oh, I just saw myself shooting a jump shot.
that's
Like,
awesome.
oh boy. Um, how does that play out for me in life? It's um it's a constant state of awareness. It can be lonely. It can be lonely at times for me, only because there's a heightened sense of awareness. And for me, as a person who is a self-identified empath, who tries to always be aware of how other people are experiencing me, not necessarily from judging myself, but just being aware of how I'm showing up and the energy that
Mhm,
I'm bringing into a room. It works out well because there's a heightened sense of consciousness, but it does take some energy too, right? I mean, to be aware, you're doing not only a lot of transmitting, but you're absorbing a lot in, right? And so it takes a lot of energy, but it's well worth it, because it does affect how I show up on a day-to-day basis. And I'm hoping that people who encounter me would say the same thing in how we interact with each other as human beings.
well, I love, like the breathing part and the awareness part, because without the breathing and without the with the breathing and with the awareness,
Mm,
you actually have the ability to see further around you and within than you do if you're not doing either of those or not only doing one of those.
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, breathing, whether it's yoga, whether it's a stressful situation, even in sleeping, right? If you think about um, as we get older, or sometimes people have sleep apnea and challenges sleeping. I mean, that's literally breathing. That's literally saying, how do I train my diaphragm to take those diaphragmatic breaths that we used to take when we were younger, because
Mhm.
we've gotten away from that. So that can be learned as well. So yes, breathing is core. It's our connection to greater life, to the universe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am just I'm just thinking of the clients that come in to see me for, and whether it be a colonic or whether it be for energy work, and how the issues they're coming in with are usually because of depression or sadness or anxiety or PTSD and things like that. And, when people walk in, I'm not like gawking at them, assessing them that way, but I'm just like gently looking at, okay, what's out of balance? Because I do have a sense of what's going on with them before they actually come in, and how the majority of the people that come in are breathing only through their chest. They're not taking that full breath down to the diaphragm.
Mm,
And, and when people come in, I feel it's my job to educate and sometimes train, and getting that good belly breath in makes just such a big difference in, like you said, calming down the nervous system, so you don't go into those panic attacks. And especially these days with everything going on in the world, it's like, what's the one thing you can do for yourself? That would be breathe.
breathe.
Breathe. Drop those shoulders back and breathe. Take it down to the belly,
Absolutely.
because that's where the fire is, the heat is, that actually helps keep you stabilized and balanced and clear in your thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Torian, any last words for our listeners today?
Uh, yeah. I mean, first of all, just thank you all for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to be able to share information. And I think one of the things for us to consider, or for us to really think about, is as we show up as human beings, like, are we really trying to expand the horizon of our experiences? What are we doing to intentionally put ourselves in situations that are uncomfortable, so that we can actually grow from them, so we can learn from them, and probably even, best of all, just learn how to listen better. Because I think with all the things that we're hearing and seeing right now, one of the things that we can all agree on, or at least the majority of us,
Mhm.
is we can do a better job of listening. And that takes a lot of courageous vulnerability, because you don't know what you're going to hear, and you may not agree with everything you're going to hear.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, if you're listening and you're breathing, you have the ability to hear clearly, and communication actually begins in listening. So you can actually, and listening, not in, as in you're trying to think of what to say next, throw
Mm,
that out in the garbage can. If you
yes.
just listen, just purely for the sake of listening, you can actually hear what somebody's saying in a way that you will never hear in any other
Mm,
way.
yeah.
And so,
Yeah, and that's that presence, right? Because in order to do that, you have to have that white noise internally, right? There's a white board that's there, and you're just taking it in, right? And you're taking it in through that diaphragmatic breath.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm Shelley Carter, owner of Alder Healing Center. And if you'd like to reach out to us, the number is right here. And you can also email us at info@alderhealingcenter.com. As you can see here, we do like to have fun, but yet we do have our times where it's really serious and time to get to work. So take care of yourselves out there. We're here to provide holistic health for the body, the mind, and the spirit. And we look forward to seeing you under the alder tree real soon. For those of you who can, please join us for our meditation tomorrow night at 7 p.m. It's for a half an hour. We are working on the crown chakra. We've been working from the root all the way up, and it's going to be enlightening. So we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great night, everybody. And Torian, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you for having me. Namaste. Peace.
Namaste.